Captain, I need to tell you something. What is it, Mr. Worf? I don't like wearing dresses. Okay, and what is the point of this statement? I just wanted to point out that not all Klingons like to wear dresses, and there's a Klingon in Starfleet Academy who is wearing a dress. You're saying in the history of all Klingons, no Klingon has ever worn a dress? Like, we have Scottish people who wear kilts. We have Polynesian people who wear dresses. We humans have a lot of diversity in our clothing. We are Klingon. We can only be one thing. Are you sure, Mr. Worf? I feel like having a planet with only one type of culture seems a little unproductive. Well, I don't like dresses. I feel like that defeats the point of infinite diversity and infinite combinations. The old Vulcan proverb. Vulcans don't know shit. Welcome to Direct Trav. I'm Trav, and today we're discussing Jaden and his dress. What would Mr. Worf say? Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and tell me what you think about Jaden wearing a skirt in Starfleet Academy. When we were introduced to the Klingons back in the 60s, they were a little different. Didn't have crinkly foreheads, wore different outfits, similar traits, but different outfits, and they weren't very honourable, often doing things that were just downright sort of slightly sinister humans, really, and a little bit of, I want to say, moderately offensive brown paint on their faces. But it was the 60s, and we got introduced to the Klingons in TNG, particularly Lieutenant Commander Worf. Now, Worf was different from other Klingons. Worf grew up on Earth after his parents were killed at Kittima. He grew up with human parents, and he wanted to get involved in his culture, so he learned everything he could about his culture. The myths, the legends, the behaviours, the pride in being a Klingon, the what it is to be Klingon, all written by Klingon warriors. When you look at the TOS movies, the Klingons look similar. They have crinkled foreheads, but they're also not very honourable. One Klingon kills his own chancellor, another Klingon decides to steal some technology for and another one is just I wanted to say 80s goth band muscle dude. And so we didn't have a clear depiction of Klingons until Worf. All things aside, Worf wanted to be connected to his culture and be a part of that culture. And what we got was a lot of great Klingon stories. Worf and Michael Dorn built the Klingon Empire. The writers of TNG built the Klingon traditions and culture around the warrior class. The warrior class? I might be saying this wrong. I've been told I say this wrong. So what we had for more than 7 years, he was in Deep Space Nine as well, is other Klingons, of whom very often weren't very honourable, Gowron, the Duras sisters. We had plenty of Klingons who weren't honourable and weren't really warriors. They were more conniving like Romulans. The Duras sisters even joined with the Romulans. And we had Worf, who was honourable and who wanted to be a warrior, who wanted to be a fighter, who wanted to have that honour in Klingon texts. He was trying to be a part of his culture, but while being a very serious person. Which is all well and good. He was connecting with his culture on a different way to other Klingons. And he was finding his place in the Federation, but also as a Klingon warrior, and often had to deal with the fact that which one would he choose when it came down to it. Worf was the essential Klingon. What we know of Klingons is essentially Worf. We got a bit of B'Elanna, who introduced to a little bit of culture around the Barge of the Dead and a few other little traditions, but she was half human, half Klingon, and she had to deal with her issues in regards to Klingons, her issues in regards to her mother, but a lot more sort of interpersonal. When we get to Star Trek Discovery, we get Klingons who have a very clear culture. They look very different, and they are a completely unique group of people, which is fine. They use their language a lot more. They're much more, I want to say, stylized. And I like makeup change, prosthetic change. It doesn't mean anything if you have Klingon culture there. And in the end, Discovery had a lot of Klingons who were claiming honor, but once again, not always honorable, always fighting amongst each other's houses, always trying to one-up each other. The warrior class we were shown, politicians we were shown. And it just seems really odd to me that a bunch of people have an issue with Jaden, a 32nd century Klingon, wearing a skirt or a dress or whatever he wants to wear, really. Jaden is a different type of Klingon. He bird watches. He doesn't like to fight. He is also most likely homosexual. And this is the difference, right? He isn't a warrior class. He doesn't want to be a warrior class. We see an episode of Starfleet Academy where he outright chooses to honor his brother by not hunting a bird or by going on a hunt or being a warrior. And it's genuinely a unique type of character. But there's one other character we can turn to who is in Star Trek Enterprise, who is a lawyer. He talks about his parents, of whom disowned him because he wanted to be a lawyer, because they were warrior caste. The Klingons themselves could not function without other types of Klingons. You would have to have health-related Klingons, or you'd have to have lawyer Klingons, banking Klingons, prostitute Klingons, salesman Klingons. You would have to have, in any culture, at least some degree of different types of things. So the Klingons in the TNG era became very monocultural. They were all Klingons of the warrior caste. That is pretty much all they were. We had politicians, but they also lived by a warrior ethos, supposedly. And what I find really odd is that people have chosen to pick on Jaden for wearing a skirt. And it's not about the skirt. It's about the femininity and the masculinity of the Klingons. The Klingons have often been portrayed as hyper-masculine, blokey, if you will, characters. But have they really? Because masculinity is subjective. I would argue that being true to yourself is braver than pretending to be something you're not. I would argue that being Klingon doesn't mean you have to adhere to all the Klingon rules. And that's me as a human. Now, a big change to this is obviously, we see the Klingons in Strange New Worlds, but they're a bit more like the TOS Klingons, a bit less about the honor. And we get what I would like to call a Klingon who's different, which is, it makes sense. Why would you have a Klingon who's exactly the same as Worf in a series? Now, Karim Diano, they pronounce his name weird, but he plays Jaden. And he puts on the deep voice, and you can see that he has the anger and the aggression of a Klingon, but he holds it back because he wants to be different, which is no issue whatsoever. Worf in Star Trek Picard claimed to be a pacifist. He wasn't. He chopped a lot of heads off. It's really weird to me that in a sci-fi show that spans now millennia, that people seem to have trouble with a Klingon who doesn't fit the mold. Now, you obviously would have different types of Klingons. You would also have, after 800 years, or 800 years from the 25th century when we last saw Worf, or in that Klingons, you would have a substantial change in the culture, religion, and types of people. Jaden, for example, has 2 dads and 1 mum. I question whether people would have an issue if he had 2 mums and 1 dad. It's an interesting sort of look at how people sort of miss the point, or at least overanalyze the point to fit their own beliefs. And Jaden is sort of perfect for this, because Klingons being a monoculture makes no sense. Klingons all being a part of this masculine warrior community makes no sense in terms of how a planet would function. It would stagnate an entire civilization. Now, on Earth, we know from today that we have different cultures and different beliefs and different dress senses. Some things are feminine in one culture, masculine in another culture, and it's changed between that a million times in the last 50,000 years. Like, I don't understand why a dress wouldn't be for a man, because I like to free ball. So I don't, but I'd like to. And it's one of those things where, why would if we today to the 32nd century, 1200 years, why would we stagnate? And also, why would Jaden and the Klingons stagnate? The Klingons would evolve as any civilization or culture does. But it has the added thing of they're meant to be a completely alien race. So why would they adhere to our own relationship rules? Why would they have similar relationship structures to us? And it comes down to a few things, of which I think certain types within the Star Trek fandom, and I really don't like calling them fans at this point, because they just nitpicking. He wears a skirt. They don't bring up the skirt. It isn't a direct. No one brings it up. It's just there. The same way in Star Trek TNG Encounter at Farpoint, the scants are just there. There is a man wearing a dress. He's just there. What Jaden is wearing is a skirt with pants, which is very similar to the officer's dress uniform, where they wear pants. But, of course, people seem to have an issue with the lack of masculinity. Now, I don't know whether it's men who are afraid of femininity or feminine behaviors in men. I don't know whether they're afraid of femininity in themselves. It does seem very weird that, and I know 100%, if the Klingons had a central male and two females as his wives, I don't think we'd have the same uproar. If Jaden was a warrior wearing, say, something more akin to a kilt or a dress uniform, they would have less of a problem because he was more masculine. I don't think they have a problem with Klingons having different cultures and different beliefs and different relationships. I think they have a problem with femininity. A lot of the problems and a lot of complaints we get is Michael Burnham cries too much, or a character is written to be some sort of perfect woman. And Janeway got the same flack, and Seven of Nine is the only one who sort of gets less of that. And somehow it's the woman wearing the catsuit, Jolene Blalock in Star Trek Enterprise. Once again, people love Jolene T'Pol, but they said she was too emotional and she did too many things wrong. But a lot of people loved her because she wore a catsuit. And here lies my interest in this topic, because I am across all social media. I'm on X, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Threads, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook. And a lot of the issues, and they blatantly say it now, emboldened by terrible politicians of whom feel that their bigotry somehow wins them points in the world. They're terribly emboldened, and they will say, why is this Klingon feminine? Why is he like that? And I ask you, and I ask people, why would femininity be thought of as a weakness? Women have children. Women wear high heels, which, if you've ever put on high heels, which those people probably haven't because that'd be too feminine. They are painful to wear. Horribly painful. They have period pain. Horribly painful. They go through things that men don't even recognize half the time. And they get through it, and there's a strength in femininity and in being that. Now, why is that femininity looked at as a weakness? Now, I don't know. I don't know why these particular fans feel that femininity is a weakness. And I do kind of blame, and I've talked about this on TikTok, that the TNG era had a weird particularly the Next Generation and also Enterprise and aspects of Voyager and Deep Space Nine. Well, actually, no, not Deep Space Nine. But the Next Generation had a really bad habit of Deanna Troi was very feminine. And very rarely did you see her doing anything in command until later seasons when Jerry Taylor came on board. Same with Beverly Crusher. The only more dominant female figure we had in the 7 seasons of TNG was Diane Muldaur as Pulaski. And she was universally hated and kicked off the show. And I find that interesting. Every time we have a discussion about strong females within Star Trek, we bring up Janeway. Janeway, Seven, T'Pol. And look, Deanna and Beverly grew stronger over the series. The movies, they were sort of relegated to a background lot. But the TNG era really struggled with not pushing it enough. And in terms of Star Trek Voyager, they started off with Kate Mulgrew as the first female captain, and they brought in 7 of 9 to be... Well, they started doing it with Kes, to be honest, in the last season she was in, putting her in catsuits. And then Jerry Ryan was brought in and put her in a catsuit. Luckily, Jerry Ryan was a great actress, and she got some damn good stories to write. But she was, and I have no doubt, brought in to get the sexy appeal for the men. And I think what these fans have trouble with is that the show isn't strictly for straight men anymore. It's also for women, it's also for gay men, for lesbians, it's for the whole spectrum of humanity. Now, I don't understand why, if you believe in the ideals of Star Trek, which is the IDIC, infinite diversity and infinite combination, Gene Roddenberry has said that he should have done more for representation of gay people in Star Trek. And we finally get that, and that's somehow a big issue. We had a lot in Discovery. Picard flirted with lesbianism, but never really sort of committed to it. And Strange New Worlds, once again, flirts around it, but doesn't have any strong, like even the bisexual character, Chapel, falls in, her first loves are Spock and the Doctor, who I've forgotten the name of now, but you can write it in the comments. And so even though the characters are there, they're very sprinkled in the background. We did have a trans actress in the first season, but really not much. Discovery and Starfleet Academy are going for that whole spectrum of humanity thing and whole spectrum of alien culture. Now, the one thing Picard did do very, very well was when they introduced the Romulans in season 1 of Star Trek Picard, we had different segments of the Romulan community. We had no crinkled TOS Romulans, crinkle-headed TNG Romulans, and we had sort of Kelvin Timelash-ish, rebel-ish Romulans. And I would consider that to be a diversity within the culture of the Romulans. The Klingons haven't had that, ever. Other than, like, obviously their makeup changes, the Klingons haven't had that diversity shown on screen. So when these kids were growing up, they see the Klingons, they have one perception of the Klingons. And they didn't really get that the show was about, like, the Klingons are the sort of opposite of diversity inclusion. And I wonder if that is specifically because Gene Roddenberry asked them to be, or whether that's the way they were written. But they've always been shown as being very monoculture. And we finally get Jaden, who is a gay character. I'm almost 100% sure. He does a lot of flirty eyes. And he's wearing a dress, and he's not that typical masculine quality. And somehow that's portrayed as an agenda and a wokeness. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, what are you talking about? This guy is just being a different type of Klingon. Klingons have to have that diversity. Otherwise, even the storylines would go stagnant within the Star Trek universe, because you can't keep telling the same stories of Klingon honor over and over again, because that's just boring. And believe me, I did not like the Klingon episodes as a kid, and I don't mind them now, but they're still not my favorite because they were all very much the same. It's another tradition where they show that Worf's culture is a bit wacky and angry and violent, and it was always the same sort of stuff. And yes, they have been a well-explored alien culture within the Star Trek universe, but we've never really explored outside of spaceship, military, warrior, honor. We've never explored outside that. And even in this episode, the fathers of Jaden are warriors. His brother is a warrior, so he is just different. Now, I won't go into the fact that I think that having the slightly different Klingon be a bird watcher and not like violence and somehow gay being kind of stereotypy. I do like that he is included in this mixture of characters. Now, why do these fans have an issue with this? And why are they so emboldened now, but they didn't bring it up during episodes of TNG where they talked about gender in regards to the outcast, in Star Trek Enterprise where they had AIDS allegories. They didn't bring it up when Quark becomes a Ferengi in Deep Space Nine because it was played off as a comedy, maybe. I'm trying to work out, and it's a mixture of two things, and it's a big question in regards to the whole LGBTQIA thing. Do people have a disdain for trans characters because of femininity? Is the problem not that they have a problem with gay men or anything like that? It's the perception that these men are somehow less and feminine. Does it mean that these men feel that women are less? And you would have to ask that question. Do they somehow judge male characters for how little they act like women? And I think that is the crux of the story. In my personal opinion, it feels to me like men are afraid of their own femininity and their own masculinity being threatened. And that's a fear, to me, that's a fear of self. That's a fear of perceptions of self. And they apply it to these characters. It does not make sense that people would judge Jaden for wearing a dress if we have a Scottish culture who wear kilts or a Polynesian culture, as I said before, who wears dresses. It doesn't make sense because dresses are inherently feminine if you look at the full world and the full diversity of the world. It only makes sense if these people are looking at it from their own perspective of he is slightly feminine, oh my God, that is bad. Why is femininity bad to these people? And why is a man being themselves threatening to these people? And maybe it says more about them than it does about Star Trek, certainly. A show which literally has prided itself for 60 years this year on showing diversity and progressive politics and liberalism. They live in virtually a communist utopia or a humanitarian utopia. Why is that so scary to these people? Like, why is femininity the thing that they draw the line on? Why is a Klingon being different the thing they draw a line on? And I don't think I can solve, like this video is more a discussion of just my thoughts on it, but it comes down to me, and it feels very much to me, that they're scared of femininity. They're scared of themselves being somehow less than a man, or what they perceive as a man. And I don't know why, because women are stronger than men, in my opinion. And women are the reason we all exist. They are the motivations, they are the inspirations for us as men. And men have a place in the world, but having a fear of femininity is really fucking weird. I think personally that having the diversity and the different type of character of Jaden within Star Trek Starfleet Academy allows them to explore aspects of that race of which are different and new, which is the whole point of Star Trek. And exploring the world of Klingons and them having a different type of relationship or a newer style of relationship or something like that. We already know that Klingon men have 2 penises. So why wouldn't they have 2 partners, 2 wives, 2 husbands? They could go at the same time, depending where their penises are. It's genuinely a genuinely interesting thought to have for me. I really want to know your thoughts on this. Make sure to like, comment, or dislike if you want. Spread this around. Let's talk about why it's a problem for Jaden to wear a skirt and birdwatch.